Voilà. Test Palais Wilson pour le first floor 1, 2, 3, 4. Allez, test canal anglais, le 2.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is a very great pleasure for me to open this 29th session of the United Nations Committee on Enforced Disappearances. To start out, I would like to warmly welcome our new members and commend them on their election as members of this committee. We have Madam Maria de Finis from Croatia, Mr. Elias Ricardo Solis Gonzalez from Panama, Mr. Paolo de Tarso Venucci from Brazil, and Mr. Yakuma Jean de Dieu Bambara from Burkina Faso, who hasn't been able to be with us this morning for reasons outside of his control, but he should be with us tomorrow. Before giving the floor to the representative of the Secretary General, let me say a couple of words. Because I'm coming to the end of the term entrusted to me as the chair of this committee. My colleagues have indeed placed their trust in me 2 years ago in September 2023, and over the course of the last 2 years, it was an honor and pleasure for me to take up this function and take on various responsibilities. Following this, I led the committee to think about a collective strategy for the coming 2 years. Together, with the encouragement of the Bureau, we have defined 3 strategic goals. Namely, the first one is the promotion of the ratification of the Convention through various channels, the key issue being the preparation and organization in coordination with our partners of the first World Global Congress on Enforced Disappearances. This major event took place as a result of the efforts and commitment of everyone in January 2025 rather, and we'll come back to that a little later. In parallel, we also made headway in strengthening our links with regional institutions in Europe, America, Asia, and in Africa. We also bolstered our connections and interactions with the local offices of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and also with some NGOs. Of course, efforts will need to continue to strengthen synergy, improve complementarity, and maximize our impact with increasingly scarce resources. The second strategy is the development of the procedures within the committee. Improvements had to take place within our reporting procedure to make it more agile, fully in step with the convention, and compatible with its integration within the overall reform of the committee system. We thought a great deal and we reached satisfactory results. We have included a number of amendments to our 2 rules of procedure. Of course, we always face restrictions which are outside of our control. I'm thinking here of the limits of the 2020 process, the treaty body strengthening system, pursuant to Resolution 68/268, which has not yet been completed. That's 5 years following the deadline set after the General Assembly, and this leads to systemic difficulties and also a crucial lack of resources to conduct our mandate. We also moved forward with our working methods on urgent actions to ensure that this procedure is more reactive, protective, and better adapted to states' requests. And there again, we face a lack of resources because this procedure has never been taken into account in calculating the Resolution 68/268. And we also reformed our urgent complaint system by incorporating a number of new concepts, and this has been incorporated by other committees such as hearings and also the possibility of receiving a courier. The third strategic objective now is to continue to think about certain thematic issues, particularly within the context of the convention. And whilst continuing to work on thematic areas that have been highlighted through general comment on migration within the context of enforced disappearances, we adopted 2 new texts, 2 new approaches. And I'm thinking of the Declaration on Enforced Disappearances, which are short-term in nature. This is very much awaited and expected. And then we will be working on new topics as well, in particular women and enforced disappearances. The aim there is to draw up a new general comment. And then we have the issue of enforced disappearances from various sexual diversities and genders. So these are 2 years that have been quite full, as you can see. It was a very great pleasure and honor to work with my distinguished colleagues, and I'd like to greet them and thank them. I'd particularly like to thank the Secretariat for their support through Madam Alban Profet Velasco for the extraordinary work done to support our committee. And of course, I wouldn't like to forget the petitions unit who have supported us in drafting communications. It is now time to hand over the baton, and that's why a little later this morning in this session, we will have the biennial renewal of our Bureau. We are a committee which believes that renewing the term of the Bureau is very important, with a rotation every 2 years. And insofar as possible, we strive to promote that rotation, in particular the change of presidency every 2 years. So I think that's excellent. It's very positive. And once again, thank you to my distinguished colleagues. And I'd like to give the floor to the representative of the Secretary General, Mr. Mohamed Sissou Bourou.
Merci. Monsieur le
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee on Enforced Disappearances, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. A very warm welcome to all of you here in the room, as well as everyone following remotely. I have the privilege to welcome the 5 members of the committee who were elected or re-elected last June on the occasion of the 8 meetings of state parties. They are Mr. Juan Pablo Alban Alencastro from Ecuador, who was re-elected for a 2nd mandate with the committee. Monsieur Jean de Dieu Yakouma Bambara from Burkina Faso, who will join us later, as you heard from the President. Mrs. Maria De Finis from Croatia. Mr. Elias Ricardo Solis Gonzalez from Panama. Mr. Paulo de Tarso Vanucci from Brazil. A warm congratulations to each of you on your election or re-election. We all look very much forward to working in close cooperation with you. Today, I also have the great honor to highlight and acknowledge the role played by Olivier de Frouville, whose mandate as chair of the committee has come to an end. I have been one of the privileged witnesses of the time and energy Olivier has devoted to the committee over the past 2 years, including this past year as the chair of the 37th annual meeting of the chairs of all human rights treaty bodies. Olivier, comme au cours de...
Olivier, at the end of all the terms and positions you covered within the United Nations human rights system, your commitment has been constant and very much appreciated by all. The committee will continue to rely on you. Under your chairmanship, the committee has been particularly active in promoting the ratification of the convention and the implementation through ongoing constant work. Time does not allow us to mention all of the actions that you've undertaken because the list is long. However, I do wish to highlight the significant efforts that you have undertaken to promote the convention and cooperation and synergy between human rights mechanisms, and to involve players from civil society in your projects, as well as national human rights institutions and various sections of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. You've also been one of the key initiators and organizers of the first World Congress on Enforced Disappearances, which took place here in 2025 in January in Geneva. It gathered together over 2,000 participants in person and online from 118 countries. Lastly, I would be remiss in my thanks to you without mentioning your role as the chair of chairs of the treaty bodies within the particularly difficult context that the international human rights system and multilateralism face. for all of the actions undertaken and more indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much. Sir?
Ladies and gentlemen, despite the liquidity situation currently facing the United Nations, we are encouraged by the fact that while the third sessions of those committees who have 3 sessions have been cancelled, the second sessions of all the treaty bodies have or are going to take place, thereby allowing the important work undertaken by committees such as this one to proceed. I'm fully cognizant that the shortening of the meeting time of your 29th session is far from optimal, and that this has regrettably obliged you to cancel meetings that you had planned, notably with regional human rights mechanisms. The liquidity crisis also obliged you to postpone the consideration of the report of your rapporteur on reprisals and to cancel until further notice the country visits that you were supposed to carry out this year. Rest assured that the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the United Nations more broadly have and will continue to do their utmost best to ensure that your work can continue so that you can fulfill the mandate that member states have entrusted you with through the International Convention on the Protection of All Persons against Enforced Disappearances. Your role to support states to prevent and eradicate enforced disappearances in compliance with the Convention is widely acknowledged and recognized as a priority worldwide. The Secretariat of the Committee frequently receives messages from victims expressing gratitude for your support. Mr. Chair, distinguished expert, when we met in March 2023, we discussed the fact that the notion of enforced disappearances unfortunately remains little known and regretted its absence from the majority of national legislative framework and from states' agendas. This statement remains fully valid today and is accompanied by a marked resurgence of this heinous crime. In a statement published on August 30th, on the occasion of the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances, the International Committee of the Red Cross highlighted that the number of disappeared persons registered with the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement has increased by nearly 70% in 5 years. Over the same period, the number of urgent actions registered by the Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances has also increased by more than 73%. In terms of ratio, the upward trend has been even more dramatic for this committee. The number of urgent actions registered between September 2020 and today has increased by more than 120% over the last 5 years, growing from 969 cases to 2,133 cases, including 145 since your last session. As you are well aware, to effectively combat enforced disappearances requires concrete and coordinated interventions. Thus, I'm pleased to note your effort to promote cooperation and coordination with other actors in all your projects, whether to clarify important concepts or to raise awareness on enforced disappearances and the Convention. Since your last session in March, such efforts have materialized on various occasions. For example, on the International Day of the Victim of Enforced Disappearances last 30 August, your committee, the Working Group on Enforced and Involuntary Disappearances, and 8 other international regional human rights mechanisms jointly released a statement to recall that the prolonged isolation and deprivation of communication with the outside world to which forcibly disappeared persons are subjected constitutes a violation of the prohibition of torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. Throughout this period, you also took part in more than 20 webinars and activities organized by our regional and country presences and other partners in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and in South and Mesoamerica. The committee also initiated a process of regional consultations on your initiative to draft a general recommendation on, and I quote, women, girls, and enforced disappearances. The first of which was organized in coordination with our field presences in Mesoamerica and the Caribbean. 4 other regional consultations are planned until the end of this year. I would like here to thank the committee for always ensuring cooperation with OECHR field presences and other local partners in the implementation of all the activities. Distinguished expert, Mr. President, the work of the office and of the treaty bodies is mutually reinforcing, and we will continue to build on the substantive deliberations and decisions of your committee and those of the other treaty bodies. Your concluding observations on country-specific situation, your reports on country visits, your urgent actions, general comments, and jurisprudence constitute the backbone of the work of the office and of the UN system on enforced disappearances. This work is of utmost importance and must be strengthened. It pains me to say that it is particularly challenging in the current context. In addition to chronic resource constraint, the negative impact of the liquidity crisis on the planning and implementation of your work has been highlighted on several occasions, including by the chair of this committee. The High Commissioner and several of us have also used every opportunity to highlight the serious impact that resource constraints have on your work and on human rights protection on the ground in general. As stated in your joint statement on 30 August, and I quote, enforced disappearances is a wound that corrodes the fabric of society, end of quote. Your committee must reply to the daily anguish and desperate calls for help in relation to hundreds of disappeared persons. Delays in replying can easily become a factor of re-victimization. There is no question that you need additional resources to fulfill your mandate in a timely manner. To our deep regret, at this point, all indication points to a continuation of the difficult financial situation for a foreseeable future. As we speak, the financial organs of the United Nations are reviewing the revised 2026 budget, which reflects an approximately 15% cut in the revised program budget and nearly 19% in post compared to 2025, among other features. We will be in a better position to speak about how this situation will affect the treaty bodies in more concrete terms once the member states will have discussed and approved the next year budget. Turning to the treaty body strengthening process, and for the benefit of the new members, let me recall that in December 2024, biennial resolution on the treaty body system by the General Assembly invited the treaty bodies and the office to continue to work on coordination and predictability in the reporting processes with the aim of achieving a regularized schedule for reporting and to increase their effort to further use digital technology. Unfortunately, the General Assembly did not endorse the detailed proposal presented in the context of the strengthening process or the corresponding resources to implement them, such as the proposal for an 8-year predictable schedule of country review. In June this year, the chairs of the treaty bodies held their annual meeting here in Geneva, this time for a budget constraint. The meeting was understandably dominated by the UN liquidity situation, which is a symptom of a deeper crisis gripping the multilateral system. The chairs considered that this crisis is an exceptional circumstances that calls for the adoption of urgent measures to ensure the continuity of the functions provided for in the treaties and access to these procedures by state and other stakeholders. They listed a number of measures that committees should consider and adopt on an exceptional basis during this crisis period. The chairs also reviewed the status of implementation of the conclusions of the previous meeting and welcomed the alignment that has been made in some working methods, including in relation to individual communication procedures. They recommended that all treaty bodies give priority to aligning the modalities of interaction with stakeholders. The office will continue to work alongside the chairs and all the treaty body experts to support the treaty body system as efficiently and effectively as possible. We'll use all outreach opportunities, including with member states, to advocate for and to advance this essential work. Monsieur le Président, distingués membres.
Chairman, distinguished members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen. During this session, you will hold dialogues with Benin, Sri Lanka, and Montenegro. You will adopt a list of issues for Finland, Oman, and Slovenia, and also a priority list of themes for Ecuador and Iraq. You will also adopt your periodic report on urgent actions. You will also continue your discussions on Mexico as part of the procedure under Article 34 of the Convention. Lastly, you will continue your discussions on your draft general comment on women, girls, and enforced disappearances, as well as your drafts on enforced disappearances, on transnational punishment or repression, and enforced disappearances, as well as sexual diversity of gender. This session will also be an opportunity to hold your annual meetings with the Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances, but also with member states and stakeholders from civil society and national human rights institutions. You will also hold several meetings with players from civil society and other partners who work in the countries that you're going to review. This will therefore be a heavy schedule, as is the case in all your sessions. A heavy program which will lead to a great deal of expectations from everyone, starting out with the victims of enforced disappearances. I therefore wish you the best of success for a positive and productive meeting. And I very much hope that you will all be successful and attain positive results. We have a new chapter starting today with a new makeup of the committee. And with this in mind, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Madam Wan Hee Lee, head of the section on civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, and head of urgent actions, who will now give the floor to members to make their solemn declarations, members that have been newly elected or those who are re-elected, and for the elections of members of the new committee bureau. Thank you very much for your kind attention. You have the floor, Madam Lee.
Okay, if the chair will allow me to take the floor. Welcome to all of the members and new members of the committee. Excuse myself, I will use a mask for a couple of days because I'm recovering from something and I would not want to infect the members of this important committee. I'd like to proceed with the next order of business under item 1 of the provisional agenda and annotations entitled Solemn Declaration by the newly elected members of the committee in accordance with rules 15 and 16 of the committee's rules of procedure. I would like to call on the distinguished new or re-elected members of the committee to pronounce their solemn oath of office in accordance with rule 11 of the rules of procedure. And I will call you in the following order Mr. Juan Pablo Alban Alencastro, Mr. Jean-Jude Yacuma Bambara, Ms. Maria de Finis, Mr. Elias Ricardo Solis Gonzalez, and Mr. Paulo de Tarso Vanucci. And I will begin by giving the floor to Mr. Juan Pablo Alban Alencastro.
Gracias, colegas.
Thank you, colleagues. Good morning. Chairman, good morning. I solemnly declare that I shall perform my duties and exercise my powers as a member of the Committee on Enforced Disappearances independently, objectively, honourably, faithfully, impartially, and conscientiously.
As noted earlier this morning, Mr. Bambara will make his solemn declaration later during the session. I call on Ms. Maria de Finis.
Good morning to everyone. My oath is following. I solemnly declare that I shall perform my duties and exercise my powers as a member of the Committee on Enforced Disappearance independently, objectively, honorably, faithfully, impartially, and conscientiously.
Turn to Mr. Elias Gonzalez Solis, Elias Ricardo Solis Gonzalez, excuse me.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I solemnly declare that I shall perform my duties and exercise my powers as a member of the Committee on Enforced Disappearances independently, objectively, honourably, faithfully, impartially, and conscientiously. Thank you.
Thank you. And I now turn to Mr. Paul de Tarso Vanucci.
Declaro solennemente.
I solemnly declare that I shall perform my duties and exercise my powers as a member of the Committee on Enforced Disappearances independently, objectively, honourably, faithfully, impartially, and conscientiously.
Thank you for allowing us to complete with item 1 of the provisional agenda and annotations, and we shall now move on to item 2, entitled Election of the Chair and Other Officers of the Committee. The floor is now open for anyone who wishes to take the floor to nominate a member for the position of chairperson of the committee. Would any member wish to take the floor? Yes, Madam Villa Quintana.
Muy buenos días.
A very good morning, colleagues. Thank you very much to Mr. de Frouville for chairing our work over the past 2 years. Thank you, Mr. Sissegoho. Thank you, Juan Hili. I take this opportunity to greet colleagues in the Secretariat and new committee members. I'd like to propose for the position of chairperson of the committee, Mr. Juan Pablo Alban Alencastro. This is a proposal that I make as member of the Latin American Caribbean group as well. Thank you very much.
See no other requests for the floor. May I take it that this Mr. Juan Pablo Alencastro was elected chair by acclamation? And seeing no request for the floor, it is so decided. Congratulations. I would like to continue to open the floor for any nominations for the positions, the 3 positions of vice chair of the committee. Does anybody wish to take the floor? Yes. Mr.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you very much, Madam. We've spoken with committee members and there is a consensus for the rest of the Bureau to be made up by Mr. Olivier de Frouville as Vice Chair through to June, and Ms. Barbara Lochwiller would take on that function. Mr. Matar Diop, Ms. Carmen Rosavilla Quintana, and Ms. Maria de Finis as rapporteur.
Thank you for your proposals. As stated, this appears to be the consensus of the committee, and I see no other requests for the floor, in which case may we consider this the decision of the committee. It is so decided. And with that, I'd like to sincerely congratulate the committee on the election of its new bureau, and I would like to invite Mr. Juan Pablo Alban Alencastro to the podium to assume the presidency.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, colleagues. A very good morning. We will now continue with the program that we have planned. The next item for consideration is the adoption of the agenda proposed for the 29th session of the Committee on Enforced Disappearances. The agenda is before you. I'd like to check whether anybody has any comments or any amendments or proposals to make to the proposed agenda for this session. I see no requests for the floor, so we can take the agenda of this 29th session to be adopted. The next item for this opening meeting, meeting number 540, I would like briefly to address you, colleagues, excellencies, representative of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, distinguished fellow members of the committee, colleagues of the Secretariat of the committee, esteemed representatives of states, civil society organizations, and most particularly victims and their families. I assume the chairpersonship of the Committee on Enforced Disappearances with gratitude, a sense of responsibility, and a sense of hope. Today, we open our 29th session, and we do this aware that it is not a mere act of protocol, but rather the renewal of a commitment, the promise that no disappearance will be forgotten and that each and every disappeared person will be searched for, the truth clarified, justice achieved, and their relatives see restorative and reparatory justice. Since the entry into force of the Convention almost 15 years ago, on the 23rd of December 2010, the international community has moved forward with determination in addressing the phenomenon of enforced disappearance. The number of states parties to the treaty has grown steadily. In many cases, legislative reforms have been promoted and specialized institutions have been created for the search for disappeared persons and a care for the needs of victims. The observations and recommendations we have issued have promoted specific changes for the benefit of victims. The urgent action mechanism has enabled us to respond to thousands of requests and to trigger search, investigation, and protection proceedings in various regions of the world. Hundreds of individuals have been found alive, and thousands of families have received responses following years of uncertainty. This work would not be possible without the tireless collaboration of victims, groups, and civil society organizations supporting them, whose bravery and courage in denouncing, documenting, and searching constitutes the very heart of our work. Over these 15 years, the committee has contributed to the development of international standards in the area through the adoption of several interpretative declarations, some jointly, some guiding principles for the search of disappeared persons, and a general comment regarding disappearances in the context of migration. We're now working on a new general comment on women and enforced disappearance and interpretative declarations regarding transnational repression and enforced disappearance, as well as disappearance and sexual and gender diversities. These initiatives reflect the ability to adapt of the UN treaty bodies and to adapt to the changing realities of the world, and reflect the commitment of this committee to provide guidance to states and support to victims in the face of emerging phenomena. Despite the successes, significant challenges remain. Enforced disappearance continues to be used in various regions as a tool of repression, terror, and social control. We observe an increase in the so-called short-term disappearances used to intimidate and punish human rights defenders, journalists, and peaceful demonstrators. We are also documenting increasingly disappearances committed by non-state actors, which pose huge challenges in terms of state responsibility, due diligence, prevention, investigation, and accountability. Another worrying area of concern is the disappearance of people on the move. Migrants who, passing through dangerous routes, are intercepted, summarily expelled or deported or transferred without any record. Enforced disappearance is therefore not a crime of the past, but rather of the present as well. Statistics from United Nations mechanisms show tens of thousands of unresolved cases, and impunity remains the rule in very many situations. Behind every complaint are families searching, societies who are unable to heal wounds, and weakened rule of law. The goal of universal ratification of the Convention is still far from being achieved. Without universal ratification and full implementation, enforced disappearance remains a threat in many places outside the committee's remit. Where the Convention has been ratified, very often legal gaps persist. Enforced disappearance is not criminalized as a standalone crime. Suitable records of persons deprived of their liberty are not kept properly, and the authorities lack immediate search investigation protocols. These gaps perpetuate the issue and diminish families' hopes. Another challenge arises from the budgetary and administrative limitations faced by the international human rights system. The liquidity crisis is forcing the suspension or termination of contracts, postponement of meetings, accumulation and delay of tasks, compromising our effectiveness. The liquidity and budgetary problems of the United Nations also affect the capacity to follow up on urgent actions, to conduct visits, to address individual communications, and to conduct promotional activities. Fulfilling victims' rights requires not only political will, but also adequate resources. Allow me now to address those who listen to us from the pain of absence. Your dignity and strength are the driving force of our work. We will not rest until every disappearance has been clarified. The search for your loved ones is a collective cause that calls us all beyond borders and beyond ideologies. To organizations supporting victims, we express our deepest thanks. You are indispensable allies, providing information, supporting families, and enriching our discussions. Your work bolsters our independence and reminds us that human rights are a common endeavor. To my colleagues, I reiterate my trust and above all my admiration for you, for the independent, rigorous and sensitive work that you have been conducting for a long time now. I believe that this consolidates the credibility of the committee. Lastly, I make an appeal to states. There can be no justification for enforced disappearance. You must help us to promote ratification and full implementation of the Convention, to prosecute and punish enforced disappearance in accordance with its particular severity, to design and maintain accessible and updated records, and to immediately activate search mechanisms. I invite states that have not yet done so to recognize the committee's competence to receive individual communications and interstate communications, and to cooperate with our follow-up mechanisms in good faith in a timely, comprehensive manner. And above all, I would urge you to ensure and to guarantee continued resources to your own institutions working in this area and to the United Nations bodies. The progress achieved over these 15 years shows that truth and justice are possible. Every new state party, every resolved case, and every person located shows us that the path that we have taken makes sense. The Convention is consolidated as a living instrument thanks to the participation of victims, civil society, experts, and the political will of many governments. The fight against enforced disappearance requires bravery, empathy, and determination. Today, henceforth, we renew our commitment to transforming the suffering of millions of human beings affected by the horror of enforced disappearance, and transforming that into truth, justice, reparation, and memory. Thank you very much indeed.
A continuación,
I now, and as is usual practice of this committee, at the beginning of all sessions, we will open the floor for a tribute to victims. And to do that, we will watch a video on the first World Congress on Enforced Disappearance that was held January this year.
The first World Congress on Enforced Disappearances, held on the 15th and 16th of January 2025 in Geneva, marked a pivotal moment in the global fight to end enforced disappearances. This event was attended by over 2,000 people from 117 countries, including victims, civil society organisations, NHRIs, and state representatives. The Congress reignited a global movement to combat this grave human rights violation by sharing experiences, exchanging lessons learned, and fostering solidarity. Victims of all regions of the world shared powerful stories of resilience, underscoring the universal nature of this struggle. Organised with the significant involvement of the Committee on Enforced Disappearances, the Congress highlighted its critical role in monitoring the implementation of the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. By engaging with states, addressing individual cases, and promoting victim participation, the committee's work is essential to promote justice and accountability. Key follow-up actions include protecting victims and human rights defenders, empowering civil society, engaging young people, and strengthening legal frameworks to ensure accountability and psychosocial support. These priorities aim to unite global efforts towards a world free from enforced disappearances. As the Congress concluded, one message stood out. This is a call to action for governments, communities, and individuals to stand united so that one day enforced disappearances disappear.
y a continuación,
Now, to present some comments in the framework of this tribute to victims, I'll give the floor to our Vice Chair, Mr. Olivier de Frouville, for some remarks.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairperson, and I do apologize for taking the floor so soon after your election, but it is a tradition in this committee to hear the statements from victims at the beginning of our session. It inspires us, it gives us strength. We have chosen in this session to show this video summarizing the first World Congress on Enforced Disappearance, and the committee I was tasked by the committee with perhaps issuing not exactly a response, but comments really to recall the importance of this Congress and follow up to it. It's true that at a time when hate mongers are seeking to pit people against each other across the world, it's particularly valuable at this Congress to see people from all continents coming together around the same values, the same rights, the same claims, sharing an experience which is both tragic and deeply human at the same time. The First World Congress on Enforced Disappearance represented more than just a mere glimmer of hope in the dark days that we're living through. Over the 2 days, we saw a huge, extraordinary demonstration of strength and resilience from the global movement for human rights and against enforced disappearance. I think all of those who participated in that Congress was deeply struck by the message of victims being a message of love and of truth. It was a strong message, a message that has moved mountains and that continues to move mountains. The fundamental purpose of the World Congress was to bring together, for the first time, all stakeholders involved in fighting enforced disappearances. States, whether or not they have ratified the United Nations Convention, family associations and associations of the disappeared and survivors, international organizations, international NGOs, the media, academics, and others. There had never been such an opportunity for all of those sharing the same concerns and goals to come together to exchange their experiences, to coordinate their activities, and to draft common strategies. Thanks to the organizers of the Congress and the total commitment of all partners, the challenge was fully met. The results of the Congress far exceeded our initial expectations. The figures speak for themselves. They don't give us a full picture, but they do speak for themselves. 620 in-person participants, almost 1,400 online participants from 118 countries, 301 civil society organizations, including 82 victim-led organizations, 76 state delegations present. What doesn't come across in the figures is the strength of the witness statements, the testimony and the commitment of those involved, and also the pledges that the organizers of the Congress invited participants to make. Pledges around a proposed plan of actions in very specific areas for coordination. The Congress was action-oriented, as we say. 16 states submitted formal pledges, that is, they announced during the inaugural meeting these pledges. 5 international regional organizations did so, as did 25 civil society organizations, 2 NHRIs, and 4 academic institutions. The Congress was not the end goal in and of itself. Of course, it was a success, but it's essentially a process that must continue. It's now hugely important that all partners get organized to follow up to these commitments, including a significant stepping up in the rate of ratifications of the Convention on Enforced Disappearance to achieve almost universality within a reasonable time frame. Of course, I'd invite you to consult the Congress's report. It's available online in various languages, but I can already tell you that several key actions over and above the pledges were identified at the Congress, and I'll tell you about the main ones now, namely the creation of a network initiated by victims in sub-Saharan Africa. That's the only region where this kind of network doesn't currently exist. The creation of a global network of young people on enforced disappearance. It's important today that we prepare for succession in this very difficult context where human rights defenders need further support. The holding of regular meetings of women seeking their disappeared loved ones, follow up and monitoring of sessions of the CED, and bolstering the capacity of civil society to facilitate their interaction with the United Nations protection mechanisms with regional organizations as well. There were a number of measures and actions that have already been taken, and I just wanted to give you a bit of a stock take, really, in terms of my remarks, to really demonstrate how the momentum from the Congress is really moving forward. In terms of commemoration, of course, this is not an exhaustive list. This is information that we've got, but I just wanted to mention two events that took place following the Congress. The first of all was the commemoration of the International Day of the Right to Truth in Paris, with the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the French Association for the United Nations. This was a conference that was organized following the Congress to galvanize stakeholders, to mobilize civil society and also government stakeholders with this priority in mind. More recently, on the 28th of August, on the International Day for Victims of Enforced Disappearances, it's on the 30th of August, but on the 28th of August in Pretoria in South Africa, there was a meeting jointly organized by the OHCHR office in Pretoria and the ICRC. This was an event focusing on enforced disappearance and particularly those who are unaccounted for but not forgotten, commemorating the missing from Southern Africa. And this was a strong message from the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for South Africa, namely commitment to finding those who disappeared in the region and more broadly. So that was a beacon of hope that other states from the region and the sub-region may well follow to try and develop this sub-Saharan African network on enforced disappearance, particularly with support from states that are already parties to the convention. When it comes to combating impunity, there have been various follow-up activities that we should mention. During the Congress, there were two panels that focused solely on the issue of combating impunity. The first was organized by the International Commission of Jurists and focused on international appeal and recourse mechanisms. The second was organized with the support of the Paris Bar Association and focused on the action of national courts with a focus on extraterritorial jurisdiction, including universal jurisdiction. The two panels were held during the Congress and they were preceded by a special panel that was held on the 31st of January in Paris, the Day on International Criminal Justice, where key issues that had arisen, particularly the obstacles to prosecution of perpetrators of enforced disappearance. And then on the 16th of June in Geneva, there was a meeting held jointly between the Geneva Human Rights Platform of the Geneva Academy and the Paris Human Rights Center. Strategies and prospects in prosecuting enforced disappearances, harmonizing the law and coordinating actors. This was an expert seminar, and the goal was to bring together for the first time a network of experts on the issue of prosecution of the crime of enforced disappearance so as to identify the obstacles to prosecution and indeed in the definition of the crime of enforced disappearance, but also in activating international and national procedures. Hopefully this first meeting will be followed by other expert meetings, and there are a number of recommendations that were made by stakeholders that participated in that: judges, lawyers, prosecutors, human rights experts, including committee experts and academics as well. And there were also victims' representatives there too. On the same subject, combating impunity, we should highlight that coming up on the 15th of October in Geneva, there will be a meeting jointly organized with the International Association of Judges and the International Bar Association's Criminal Law Committee. As I say, that's the 15th of October. in partnership with the UN Working Group on Enforced Involuntary Disappearances surrounding the publication of the thematic report on territorial and extraterritorial jurisdiction and universal jurisdiction. That will be entitled Tools for Justice and Accountability, Universal Criminal Jurisdiction over Enforced Disappearances. And that'll be held, as I say, on the 15th of October here in Geneva. In terms of institutional developments, there are 3 events that we should flag. The 150th General Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union, the IPU, that was held in Tashkent on the 7th of April and was followed by, it was a subject on one of the subject was one of the issues mentioned in the panel on children and enforced disappearance during the Congress. Various other UN bodies participated, and this is the subject of illegal international adoption that was discussed. And with the forthcoming adoption at the 151st Assembly of a resolution on the issue of supporting victims of illegal international adoption. On the European organizations side, which is what I followed more closely, personally speaking, but of course, I'm sure there are other developments that may have occurred in other regions. As chairperson of the committee, I was invited by the regional office of the High Commissioner in Brussels to go to Brussels to visit European institutions, and in particular to hold a very useful meeting with COHOM, the Committee on Human Rights Issues, on the 12th of March 2025. It bore a very frank exchange for European Union members who've not yet ratified, and for follow-up actions following on from the Congress regarding implementation of commitments that were shouldered during the Congress. Now, we should note that unfortunately 8 member states of the European Union have still not ratified the convention, which is deeply regrettable and was regretted by this COHOM. We should also mention that 4 candidate states have not ratified the convention either, and it is urgent, I would say, that this anomaly be corrected by December 2026, I would say.
Il faut également signaler, toujours sur le plan européen,
I should also point out within the European Union that there was a hearing from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, Europe 46, and this was devoted to the follow-up of the World Congress on Enforced Disappearances and the actions that could be taken within the Council of Europe to follow up on the Congress. This meeting took place on the 23rd of June 2025, and I should point out that 19 members of the Council of Europe have not ratified the convention. So there again, this is something that needs to be looked at internally. A number of actions have been pinpointed, or were pinpointed at that meeting, and some of them were mentioned. We have 2 resolutions adopted in 2022 by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And let me just summarize the establishment of a specialized working group or a task force on enforced disappearances within the Council of Europe. And this allows for a better promotion of the convention, but also implementation of the ratification by members of the Council of Europe, and particular focus on implementing the rulings of the European Court of Human Rights related to enforced disappearance cases. By way of conclusion, well, I've just given you a list of issues. Let me tell you about some upcoming meetings within the Congress. We have Geneva Peace Week 2025. This will be held on the 15th of October next in Geneva. We will have a peace panel particularly focused on the search for victims of enforced disappearance and a key contribution to peace building. It's the Geneva platform that's organizing this multi-stakeholder panel. There'll be a focus on the Syrian situation and focus on persons who have disappeared in Syria. The goal there really is to highlight the bridge between initiatives which progress peace, justice, transitional justice and human rights, and the search for victims of enforced disappearances. Still within the same thread of these initiatives, if you will, we have the Catalan initiative for peace. They're organizing a meeting of female researchers by the end of 2026. And let me just conclude by mentioning that on the 20th of December 2026, in about a year's time, a little over a year's time, it'll be the 20th anniversary of the adoption of Resolution 61/177 by the General Assembly, and that is the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances. This is the resolution by which the General Assembly adopted the convention and ratification signature by states. I think there'll be a need to plan an event, perhaps a second Congress, or a more modest event to follow up on this occasion, the 20th anniversary in 2026. I think we will make an appeal, but we'll renew that appeal with our meeting with states parties. I think we should launch an appeal to extend the group of friends, the group of states who are friends of the convention, and this will apply to all regions. So the Congress really has set the tone for commitments, and now it's high time to take action. Thank you very much, sir.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. de Froville. Given that we have concluded the items for our public meeting, we'll now move to a closed meeting of the committee.
Vamos a tomar 5 minutos.
Let's take a 5-minute break.
you.